Welcome to Sisters in Sobriety. Today we have Randall Wesley Hall, a poet, a recovery facilitator, and advocate. And Randall spent decades grappling with addiction and then faced a life altering diagnosis of Guillain-Barré syndrome. And instead of it breaking him, it became the pivot point for a radical recalibration of life, recovery, and purpose.
He went on to lead Recovery Dharma Global, a peer led Buddhist-inspired recovery organization. He's published the book Poem Free, and he speaks candidly about integrating mindfulness, ritual, and community in healing. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you all for having me. It's good to be here.
Thanks, Randy. So, can you share a little bit about your early life, where you grew up, and how you first came in contact with drugs and alcohol?
Oh, absolutely. I grew up in Tampa, Florida, and like many people, I just kind of grew up in that culture where alcohol and drugs were accepted and almost expected to be something that you would do kind of when you reached early adulthood. So when I was 13, 14 years old, I started to experiment with alcohol. And it was kind of like a magic elixir that suddenly made being around other people so much easier. And the popular kids were doing it, and I certainly wanted to be among the popular kids. I realized really quickly, though, that I was not doing it like other people were doing it. They could kind of pick it up and put it down, whereas I would drink until I got sick, and then I would start drinking again, and I would sort of drink every night of the week. And by the time I was 19, it was very clear to me that I had a problem. And I tried to speak to loved ones about what I was experiencing. And I was sort of told, like, hey, man, like, you're living the dream. You know, you're working hard, you're playing hard. You go to one of the best colleges in America, you're getting good grades. An alcoholic is someone who can't do their job because of their drinking, and you're achieving quite highly. And of course, the truth was is that I was just quite high, like all the time. And I wasn't having a good time. From the outside, it probably looked like I was, though. So I went to a good law school and I became a lawyer because I kind of had that belief that if I could just acquire all of the things, then on that day I would be happy. And we're kind of sold that, I think, in America, especially. And what ended up happening is I would use amphetamines kind of throughout the day to blast off, to bill more hours and outthink and outwork my opponents. And then at night, I would consume huge quantities of alcohol and marijuana to kind of come back down and try to maintain some semblance of a circadian rhythm. And this was a cycle of violence, obviously, against my own body. But I believed magically that I could kind of do this and that there would be no consequences for me. I didn't really like being a lawyer. I chose, of course, to be the most evil kind of lawyer because I wanted to make the most money. You know, again, going back to that early belief that if I just had all the things, then I would be happy. But the truth is that I wasn't, and I reached a point that I really needed those amphetamines, or else I wouldn't be able to spur myself out of bed in the morning to go and do the thing that I was doing. Um, I had this magical belief again that I could do this forever and it wouldn't cause damage to my body. And of course, in 2017, I'd quit being a lawyer. I believed, oh, if I just stop being a lawyer, I'll stop using drugs like I am, and it did not work that way for me. I just became a teacher, and I would use drugs all day and kind of be like Robin Williams in Dead Poets Society. I would be very stimulating, but there were other weeks that I would just be absent mentally and emotionally from, I'd be there physically, but I just really wasn't able to function. And then in 2017, I got really sick, um, probably due to neurotoxicity in my brain due to the amount of drugs that I was doing at that time. And that really changed my life for the better, even though it was just a terrible experience overall. So what happened is I was taking 3 different kinds of prescription amphetamines at the same time in large quantities. And I'm not really sure what that does to your brain, but I can tell you what happened to my brain, which is I was coaching my daughter's under 6 soccer game. And as an under 6 soccer coach, you have to kind of run around on the field and like corral the children because they kind of swarm like a bumblebee. And both of my feet went numb at the same time. And then over the course of the next 48 hours, a tingling sensation started ascending up my legs, up to the top of my head and in from my fingers towards my torso. And I went to the emergency room and I was diagnosed with something called Guillain-Barré syndrome, which is a rare autoimmune disease where the myelin sheath that kind of encapsulates your nerves throughout your body is damaged. And then damage is done to the underlying axons. So I lost the ability to communicate from my brain to the rest of my body. And I experienced just a really painful neuropathy from, again, the top of my head to the tips of my toes. So I spent 45 days in the neuro ICU at the University of Alabama Birmingham Hospital, just totally locked inside my body, unable to communicate, unable to breathe on a ventilator, feeding tube. Again, just in like pure physical pain. It's almost like that intense neuropathy all over your body, kind of like being on fire or electrical zapping. But much worse than that was the psychological and emotional just torture of being locked inside my body and unable to communicate to anyone how scared I was, how near death I was. And then on top of that, withdrawing from all of my drugs and alcohol.
My gosh.
Yeah, it was
Mhm.
very difficult. Um, so after that, I went to a special hospital in Atlanta, Georgia, called the Shepherd Center for several months, and they kind of put me back together like the $6 million man. And it almost cost that much for them to do it. And by the time I returned to
Mhm.
Birmingham, it had been about half a year, and I could walk again and talk again and do all of the things. And I finally was strong enough that I could drive independently. And when I tell you that the first place I drove was the bar and the second place was, the drug dealer's house, like a lot of people are shocked by that, because after everything that I had gone through, the idea that I would go back to that behavior again is, it obviously is illogical. But the truth is that I now had all of this new trauma and pain to cope with, including physical pain, and I still had no real mechanisms for coping beyond substances. That was really the only thing that I'd ever used to deal with my discomfort. So when the only thing you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And I just went right back to using substances again. And it became very clear at that time that I wasn't going to be able to do it like I had done it before. My body had atrophied to basically nothing. So I needed to make a change. And it was at that point that it was recommended to me that I go to treatment. I tried outpatient treatment. At the end of 5 days, I declared myself healed of addiction. And what had really happened is during those 5 days, they had showed me like, hey, here's all the like trauma work and things that you're gonna have to do. And I was like, no, thank you. At the end of those 5 days,
Okay.
I said I was better, even though I knew that I wasn't, and immediately had a large amphetamine binge. And at that point, they said, you need the werewolf treatment. And I was like, whoa, what's the werewolf treatment? And they're like, in the horror movie when the guy's going to turn into the werewolf and they chain him to the rock so he can't hurt himself or others, like you need to be
Mhm.
chained to the rock. So they took me to the back to University of Alabama at Birmingham, actually, right across the street from where I had been in the neuro ICU. And I went to the addiction recovery program there, and that was really the beginning of my recovery journey after 25 years of using substances.
Can I ask though, you were obviously willing, like you obviously wanted to do the work. It sounds like because you knew even though you did the like 5 days and I'm cured, you still though knew something. Like you still were willing to go to treatment.
Absolutely. I had known since I was 19 that I had a problem. The problem for me was that
Mhm.
I never knew anyone who had gotten better. I never spoke with
Ah,
anyone who had changed and healed their life in a meaningful way. So I really felt helpless and hopeless. I also had grown up in a household where it wasn't safe to ask for help, or to really have needs. So I had never developed that skill. And as a result, I thought this is just like what life is, and you suffer silently. And, but I had known, I can't tell you how many times, I had gone to bed at night and said to myself, okay, this is it. Like tomorrow, you're not going to do this again, you know? And then the next day by 5 p.m. or 2 p.m. or 10 a.m., I was doing the thing again. And that cycle of suffering, that frustration can be demoralizing over the period of many years, you
Mm-hmm.
know?
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's quite an experience you had to get to your path from using to recovery. And I was with you, like when you said, you went through all this physical rehabilitation, mental rehabilitation. This is prior to your drug and alcohol rehabilitation, and that you went to the bar and to your drug dealer. You're right. I was surprised. I'm surprised because you had detox from the substances, but you're so right. You didn't, while you're maybe physically detoxed, you didn't have the coping mechanisms to deal with now the added trauma of what you went through.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think that at that point, it became very clear to me that nothing outside of me was going to be able to help me change and heal my life. It was going to have to come from some sort of internal shift because, I mean, there's nothing more dramatic, right, than some higher power or force beyond my comprehension coming down and literally paralyzing me so that I can no longer hurt myself in the way that I was. And so when that didn't do it, I knew that I was going to have to do that inner work.
Yeah.
And that's scary, especially to someone like me who had never really started to look at those things. When it comes to like cleaning out a closet, it can be overwhelming at first because you got to take everything out first, and then it's like I've made a bigger mess than I had when I started. But it always gets worse before it gets better, and it's always
Yeah.
short term hard to have that long term stability. So, I
Yeah.
just yeah,
Always darkest before the dawn, right? Always
right,
darkest before the dawn.
absolutely.
Can I just ask, Sonia's gonna ask the next question, but I just wanna ask, the most evil kind of lawyer is a corporate lawyer, right? Is that what we're
Yes,
talking about? Okay.
you figured it out. I was a corporate defense litigator. So I yes,
Okay.
I was the guy who they
Uh,
brought in to crush the little guy when he had like a valid claim and it was going to affect the corporation's bottom line. I didn't actually want to do that initially. I wanted to be a human rights lawyer, and at one point
woof.
I was offered a job in New York City to do that at the United Nations. And I was very excited. And they called me and they said, oh, just one more thing. You're going to have to pass a drug test. And so 24-year-old me could not comprehend of not being able to use substances for even a couple months in order to pass a drug test. So I said, oh, forget about that. They won't make me do that in private practice and I'll make more money. And, I rationalized it in some way. But the longer that I've been sober, the more I actually think about that moment and that regret, right? That I had another pathway available to me, but like a horse with blinders, the problem with my beliefs is that I believe them and I don't question them. And in that moment, the idea of questioning that might be a path for me and that I should maybe like chill for a couple months, that never occurred to me.
You know how we sometimes will reflect on sliding doors moments that, wow, what a sliding door moment that would be for you.
Absolutely. Absolutely, because doing what I did as a lawyer, like I used a lot of substances in order to cope with the discomfort of the cognitive dissonance that I was feeling. I wanted to believe that I didn't have like a ethical framework and that I could just go out there and kind of sociopathically hurt people for money and that it wouldn't make me feel bad about myself, but that was not the truth. And a big part of what I was doing was taking the amphetamines in order to self-medicate away my moral and conscience so that I could go out and do this thing that I really didn't want to do. And I tell this story at treatment centers a lot where
Mhm.
I would wake up in the morning and I would go in the bathroom and look in the mirror and I would take amphetamines and I would say, "You're a sociopath. You can do this today." And it's like the world's worst morning routine affirmation. But I wanted to believe it because then I wouldn't
Mhm.
have to feel bad, you know?
Mhm.
Randy, so what eventually opened up recovery for you? We talk a lot about the value of different pathways. And so what opened it up for you?
Well, what happened to me is that I really wanted to get better for my daughters. I have 3 beautiful daughters, and at first, it was that external motivation that did it for me. And a lot of people say, if you're not doing it for you, then it won't work, or you're not doing it for the right reasons. And I'm a big believer that anything that gets you into a place where you're ready to make a change is a good thing. So, a lot of people have crises like I had. Maybe they have legal or financial consequences. They lose a job, they lose a relationship. And that's obviously painful, and we don't wish that upon anyone, but sometimes, we need a crisis to kind of force us to do that deeper work. And I certainly had that big crisis that happened to me, and then that external motivation of, being told like, "Hey, if you don't figure this out, like, these 3 girls, like, they're not gonna have a father," you know? So that was very helpful in motivating me to go to treatment, to make the change. But these crises, the problem with substance use is that it's a chronic condition, right? So the crises only last so long, and
Yeah.
you got to do the work long term. And I was told upon entering the treatment center that if I left there and I did what I'd always done, that I would get what I'd always gotten. So I had to do something different, and I started to become curious about what that would look like. Obviously, most people who go to treatment, they're sort of funneled into the 12 steps. The 12 steps are a program of recovery that have helped millions of people. And I certainly try not to denigrate the 12 steps when I'm speaking with others about recovery. But I will say that when I went to those meetings when I was in treatment, I just felt like the principles of that program didn't resonate with me. They kind of took us around to a lot of different local home groups. And I sort of had this feeling of like, wow, they keep telling me I have to go to these meetings the rest of my life. And I don't really like these meetings. So what happened is
Mhm.
one day they told me that they had a chaplain at the hospital who could come and speak to me, and the chaplain was a Buddhist chaplain. So, I was kind of bored that day. I couldn't have my phone or watch TV, and I was tired of coloring. So I was like, you know what? I'll talk to this Buddhist chaplain. And they sent him up, and when he arrived, he sat with me for 90 minutes. And I remember there was a storm outside, much like there is this morning here in Birmingham. And I told him a little bit about my story, and he told me about Buddhism. He taught me about the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path. And he told me that there were meetings in Birmingham where people used Buddhist principles and practices in order to change and heal their lives. And at that point, I was feeling sort of desperate because I hadn't found a lot of relief in the rooms of AA. So I said, I'll give this a try. And I went to a meeting that weekend. I kind of advocated, like, hey, will you take us to this meeting instead? And I remember going in that night, and it was like the lights were a little dimmer and everyone was talking a little quieter, and it just kind of seemed like they were living with ease. And I'd seen a lot of people in the 12 step rooms who had a lot of quantity of recovery, but I had not seen a lot of people that seemed to have a high quality of life. So when I saw these people and they seemed happy and they were kind of laughing, I was like, wow, I kind of want what these people have. And then they said, to begin the meeting, we're going to meditate. And I was like, oh no, like I'm a speed freak, like I can't meditate. That's just not for me. But it turned out that this guided meditation it was brief, and it was aimed at cultivating compassion for myself and for other people. And in that moment, during the meditation, I could feel this lightness in my chest. And I was like, wow, what's that? And it was self compassion. And so much of my using had been driven by this not good enough mentality that I needed to achieve more. So I needed more, amphetamines. So that idea of self-acceptance and not self-improvement, it was like, I just had this epiphany of like, oh, this is what it's about. It's not about like becoming better. It's about accepting like where I'm at and being okay with that and caring about myself enough to actually take care of myself. Um, so I just thought to myself, I want to keep doing this. And that's what I did. At the same time, I discovered SMART Recovery, and I decided to complement the two programs together. What I love about recovery is that you can choose any pathway, that it's available to you, that it's not one size fits all, because much like one size fits all clothing, it just doesn't fit everyone the same. And obviously, like we're all unique individuals, so surely there's a unique way for each of us to recover that will be best. So by complementing those two programs together, smart recovery being very rational based, great for your mind, observing your thoughts, making healthy choices, recovery dharma being really good for your heart, really good for cultivating that self-compassion and compassion for others. For me, it just made a lot of sense to combine those two. And that being said, I still work the steps. I spent 9 months going through the NA handbook with a sponsor because I was a big believer that the more pillars of support that I could give myself at the beginning of my journey, the better. It's kind of like when they build a building, they put that scaffolding all the way to the top. And then as they build, they take away scaffolding. And my first mentor told me, he's like, hey, man, you were a hardcore drug addict. You're going to have to be a hardcore recovery person. So whatever's available to you, take advantage of it. And that's what I did.
So the next question is going to be a two-parter that I have. Can you walk us through how you would apply the Four Noble Truths to recovery and not just theory? So, and that by saying that we haven't really explored, I know the Four Noble Truths, but maybe you can explain for our listeners what they are.
Absolutely. So the Four Noble Truths are
The
sort of,
big question.
yes,
Big question, Randy.
it
Big
is a,
question. So take it however you need.
thank you. Um, it is a big question. And at the outset, I want to say that obviously Recovery Dharma and the program of making healthier choices, whether it be with substances or processes, like it owes a great debt to Buddhism, which is a 2,500-year-old
Mhm.
religion. And it's sort of, Recovery Dharma has appropriated these practices, meditation, mindfulness, the underlying principles of Buddhism. It's a Buddhist-inspired program, but it's not Buddhist required. So, 98% of people who probably attend Recovery Dharma meetings are not Buddhist, but they're just people who found these teachings to be helpful. The Dharma, which literally translates to the teachings. So the ultimate teaching in Buddhism is the Four Noble Truths, and it's sort of an explanation for the reality of the way things are. The first noble truth is that in life there is suffering. Now, a lot of people hear that and they think of something really cynical, which is that Buddhism is saying that life is suffering. But it's not saying that. It's just saying in life there is suffering. There's also great joy, but in life there is suffering. Whether you live 80 seconds or 80 years, you will suffer. You will experience pain. And much of the suffering that Buddhism is talking about is the suffering that happens between our ears, right? The world acts on us in a certain way. It applies pressure that causes pain, but then we judge things. That shouldn't have happened that way. I should have been better than that, etc. And when I add that level of judgment to things, I'm compounding the suffering that I'm experiencing. So really, when Buddhism talks about freedom from suffering, it's talking about that freedom from the suffering between my ears more so than suffering from the world. Because again, 80 seconds or 80 years, the world will exert pain on me. The second noble truth of Buddhism is that craving is the cause of suffering. People who struggle with substances or process addictions, they certainly understand craving, that craving to do the thing to get the relief, right? That short term relief, that problem of instant gratification. And Buddhism speaks to that, and it says that's part of the human condition, and I would say even beyond that, that's part of the algorithm for life. Even the smallest paramecium wants to move away from something that it doesn't like and toward something that it likes. Humans are just in this really rare position where we can reach for this thing that will give us that instant gratification. So, in many ways, our craving is the cause of our suffering. And it's not just our craving for things outside of ourselves like substances. It's our craving for our life to be different than it is. It's craving to be able to control the way that I feel. Um, so recognizing that, Buddhism then moves to the third noble truth, which is that there is a way out of this cycle of suffering. And that's the fourth noble truth, which is the Eightfold Path. And the Eightfold Path is just an ethical framework for living your life. You don't have to believe in anything beyond your own potential to change. And it says that through wise understanding and intention and speech and action and livelihood and effort and mindfulness and concentration, I can live a life where I make skillful decisions and I suffer less. And the less I suffer, the less I'm wanting to reach for that thing that's going to give me the short-term relief from the suffering. So it's really very simple, actually. And through using these practices, I can cultivate more generosity, forgiveness for self and others, compassion, appreciative joy, kindness, empathy, equanimity. And what it looks like on a daily basis is really being intentional. When I use substances, I use them in sort of a ritualistic way. And I need to replace those rituals with new healthy rituals. I need to set intentions in the morning. I need to sit and calm my mind. I need to figure out ways that I can soothe myself, ways that I can dispute beliefs and thoughts that I might have that aren't helpful to me or just aren't true. And the practices of Buddhism kind of provide us with a framework with which we can do that on a daily basis that just feels holistic. It really isn't so much about not doing the thing that's been hurting us. It's more about cultivating a life that is so beautiful that I don't want to do the thing, that the idea of doing the thing then repulses me because it would take me out of this stability and harmony that I've cultivated for myself.
It's really interesting to hear you say this. And actually, we interviewed Dr. Judd Brewer a couple of weeks ago. He also integrates Buddhism into his practices and in his recovery. And he's a psychiatrist, though. So you don't necessarily see that often, that it's like
Yes.
that intentional. But one of his key hallmarks of his program is mindfulness. And I'm curious, how did mindfulness, which can be different, by the way, than meditation, what did mindfulness, how did that help you specifically in your recovery?
Absolutely. Again, so much of my suffering was happening between my ears. I have the dominant identity in our cultural society. I'm a straight white
Mm,
male of means. There is not any external oppression that I have to face on a daily basis here in the United States. Um, so anything that's happening, usually that's causing me a suffering, it's happening here within my ears. There are other people who are subjected to all kinds of systemic oppression. And what I like about Recovery Dharma is it's a safe place that you can go and you can talk about those things without somebody
mhm.
wagging their finger or telling you to clean up your side of the street or take accountability. Um, so for me, though, so much of my suffering is happening in my mind. It's the stories that I'm telling myself that are causing me to suffer, the ways that I put myself kind of in the corner of being a victim in a situation where maybe I'm not, and maybe I'm actually the villain in the story. Or I'm villainizing myself when I really don't need to either, right? I'm kind of making myself um, that self-loathing that I talked about earlier. So to me, mindfulness is just a recognition of what's really happening right now. It's not ruminating on what just
Mhm.
happened or fixating on what might happen next. Um, there's ancient practices that are prescribed by Buddhism and have been given like modern names by people like Tara Brach that explain how we can quickly move through our emotions. We can feel our feelings to heal our feelings, because so much of what keeps me stuck and suffering is my resistance to feeling a feeling. And if I resist it, it just persists. And I really have to have my feelings, or else they'll have me. And that's often what was happening to me during my substance use, right? Is I would take that beach ball of feelings and I would push it down underneath the water. And eventually there's just no way, there's really no escape from feelings. So what mindfulness means to me is that when I'm having a strong emotion, I stop and I pause and I breathe and I just recognize what I'm feeling in that moment. And I give it a name: sadness, anger, I label it. Sometimes just by giving it a name, it takes away some of its power. And then I just focus on where I actually feel that feeling in my body, because feelings are just sensations in the body that we tell ourselves stories about. So I actually find that place in my body, and then I do something revolutionary, which is I put all of my attention on that spot. Um, and I just feel that sensation, that feeling. And when I do that, I notice how it ebbs and flows. And that helps me realize that it's not permanent, that I don't have to do anything to make it go away. I can just like sit in the center of the snow globe and eventually it will settle. At that point, the mindfulness piece, it allows me to inquire deeper into the feeling as well, to ask myself, like, what's really going on here? You know, because oftentimes when I'm feeling hysterical, there's like a historical reason for that. It doesn't really have anything to do with what's happening now. It has to do with what happened before and the stories that I'm telling myself about what's happening now and what it means for the future. So I can inquire deeper. Maybe I'm in line at the grocery store and the guy in front of me has 17 items in the 10 items or less line, and I'm getting really agitated. It doesn't really have anything to do with him. It has to do with times in the past when I felt invisible or my sense of justice or fairness were overlooked. And then finally, mindfulness allows me to nurture myself in that moment. Instead of beating myself up, I can recognize that I'm having a human experience, that it's human to want things to be different than they are, that I can feel this sensation and I can move forward skillfully without reaching for the thing that's going to harm me or cause me more difficulty. It's really just kind of like a narrowing of focus to like what's actually physically happening and how can I move forward in a way that sends those like healing ripples out into the world, instead of doing the thing that hurts someone else or me and then leads to a chain reaction of more pain. And that's what it allows me to do. And by cycling through that, they call it a RAIN technique, right? You recognize how you feel, you allow yourself to feel that way, you inquire into the feeling, and then you nurture yourself. By developing this practice and by practicing it every day, especially in the small moments. So then when the big moments come, I'm prepared. It becomes my default processing technique. I'm able to be present wherever I go. And honestly, if I'm not present, I'm much more likely to make a poor decision, which again, like you mentioned, those sliding doors, like one lead to the next. And so I'm so grateful for the practices of Buddhism, the ways that they have been used by people in the West in order to create these systems where we can suffer less and where we can be where we are. And that recognition of like, we have a better chance to do this too if we go together, you know? It's kind of like, it reminds me not to, like, I go to the meetings a lot still to this day. I cultivate a lot of meetings. And people say like, well, it's been like 7 years. Like, why do you continue to go? And I tell them like, I go because I will forget, you know, like I need to remember
Uh-huh.
not to forget. So when I go to the spaces and we practice these things together, it's kind of like doing a fitness class or a yoga class. Like by doing it together, there's like a level of accountability and reciprocity and community. And I've always just kind of been of the mindset of like, why not do it together? Like it's just I practice yoga so much better in a group. I will quit if I'm by myself. And it's the same way with
Yeah.
these meditation and mindfulness practices.
So, Randy, when you're talking, I was listening to you say just about being aware of your thoughts and like naming the feelings. Can you talk about what the difference between awareness and judgment is?
Absolutely. So the mind wants to judge things. That's what the mind does. The heart, it beats, the lungs, they breathe, the mind, it judges. And there's a reason for that. It's an ancient survival system, right? I need to be judging things. Is this good for me? Is it bad? Etc. In order to survive. And so much of what people call anxiety is kind of like that old functioning run riot. This thing that is trying to keep me safe and trying to be helpful, but in the present moment, I don't necessarily need it to be as reactive as it is. Awareness is much more non-judgmental, even friendly. It's just an opportunity to look at whatever is arising for what it is, instead of, like I was saying before, adding that level of like storytelling to it. The mind loves a story. It wants to create a narrative out of everything. It's very like pleasing to the mind for there to be that narrative arc, right? But sometimes it's not so deep. So frequently, like when I'm having a strong emotion, instead of judging myself, instead of saying, oh, like you shouldn't feel sad, which is kind of illogical because I do feel sad, or you shouldn't feel angry. Instead of having that like that judging mind, which again just creates that suffering, can I just be aware of what is arising? And I'll use another practice for this that is very similar to rain. And it's basically a visualization practice where I welcome my demons to tea. So when I have a strong emotion like anger, for example, I will visualize my anger kind of like inside out, right? It's going to be my demons always kind of look like where the wild things are, though. You know, they're like the big monsters, and I just will visualize that anger demon coming to my house and knocking on the door, and I'll invite it in and I'll smile at it like genuinely and sincerely, like, I am happy that you are here. Like, come in. And I have a pretty pink tea set, and I'll pour my anger some tea, and I'll put my arm around it and I'll say, hey, like, what's really going on here? And it'll say, like, I don't like the way I feel. And I'll be like, oh, I'm sorry. And then I'll hug it and I'll take it to the door and I'll wave goodbye to it. And in that moment, I am like interrupting an old pattern whereby I would be angry and maybe I'd judge myself for being angry. And then that would make me even more angry or sad. Instead, I'd be friendly with it. Like I can welcome it in, I can witness it and like see that I'm suffering, and then I can love on it and let it go. And when I just bring it into my awareness like that and make it feel seen instead of judged, it's amazing how much more quickly and easily I can just surrender and let it go. And I don't have to get stuck in that cycle of suffering and then compounding the suffering through self-judgment. Because self-judgment, honestly, so many people in the rooms of recovery, they are there because of that high level of self-judgment. It's a level of judgment that is so high that they are so hard on themselves, that they deal with such a high level of self-loathing that they stop caring about themselves. And when they stop caring about themselves, they stop taking care of themselves. So much of recovery is building up that esteem for oneself, that love for oneself. I try to teach people to love themselves in like an ooey gooey way, right? Like if you really, really love yourself, no matter what, even on your worst day, then you won't hurt yourself, you know, with substances or addictive behaviors.
Mhm. I really like that practice of the what did you call it? The one that's like the where the wild things are. What do you call that practice?
It's having tea with your demons. It's again like an ancient practice.
Okay.
I just love the pretty pink tea set, and what I'm trying to do is I'm bringing that spirit of friendliness and humor to something in the past that would have been really dark and you know kind of like. Instead, I'm smiling at it because whatever feeling has come, and this includes that urge feeling, you know. if anyone who's ever done internal family systems, like we have many different parts. And like part of me is that part of me that wants that short-term relief. And that demon will come to me on a daily basis. I will be driving past the bar and he will come up on my shoulder and he'll be like, "Hey man, do you know what would be nice right now?" And I'm just like, wow, you again, you know? And I remember this guy well because he's been with me for a long time and he wants to help me is the thing. He wants to make me feel good. And
Mm.
he knows how to make me feel good for a short period of time. He can't perceive the wreckage of the past. He can't see all the future harm that he would cause. He's really trying to help me. He's just really, really bad at it. So when he comes, instead of getting angry with him or getting angry with myself, oh, I should be better by now. It's been 7 years. I've done all this work. Instead of that self-judgment, when he comes, I can be like, oh, there you are. I love you. You're trying to help me. You're telling me that I'm uncomfortable, but you don't get to drive right now because I used to let you drive all the time and you used to wreck the car all the time. But like, I still see you and I witness you. And just like as humans, like that's really, I think, what deep down what we crave. We crave to be seen and heard.
Yes.
You know, when I'm sitting in the circle with people, I don't need somebody to give me advice or fix me. I just need them to hear me and sit with me in my pain. And then I'll do the same for them, that reciprocity. And that's how the healing happens to me. It doesn't happen necessarily through us fixing each other because I don't really believe that any of us are broken. I think that we're all just having a human experience and it's really hard sometimes. And even to the extent that we are broken, we can be better at being broken by using these practices and doing it together as a community. We can suffer less. And again, the less we suffer, the less we want to reach for that thing that's just compounding the suffering. It's so tempting when we know it's going to give us that short-term relief, but it comes with such long-term consequences, financial, legal, physical, uh, relational, like professional. Like
Mm.
recovery is just the opposite of that. Like, can I use these practices to sit with my pain short term so that I can have long term stability and growth? And these practices, the way that I interact with the feelings in a friendly way, the visualizations, that's really helpful to me to moving through, like surrendering to it and feeling it, not spiritually bypassing it, but sitting in it for a minute and then moving forward in a skillful way and not getting mired in it like I used to.
So, so Buddhism teaches us about impermanence. I think the term is anicca. Is that right?
Correct.
You know? Okay.
Yes.
Did learning did did learning that nothing stays the same change your relationship with addiction?
Absolutely. I mentioned earlier that the problem with our beliefs is that we believe them. And I used to have a belief that whatever I was feeling was going to feel that way forever. And that the only way that I
Yeah.
could change it was by using a substance to sort of extricate myself from that feeling of stress or discomfort. So that recognition that I could just sit in the center of the snow globe as the thoughts and feelings swirled around me, and if I was just very still and very grounded, that they would all eventually settle. That was like a real game changer for me, just to recognize and be able to see that urge like a wave and watch it crest and roll back out. And it's also helpful for me to remember that the good feelings, the joy, and those things are also impermanent. Because then when I experience a moment of authentic joy, I really pay attention and allow myself to feel it
Mhm.
and marinate in it with that recognition again that it will be over soon and that that's okay. And that used to not be available to me either. You know, I used to really seek that, you know, when I use substances, I experienced a very high stimulated euphoria. Um, and I kind of thought that that was joy, but it's really not. It's like
Mhm.
kind of like the joy of like winning a video game. Like it's not actually real. So in recovery, we are able
Mhm.
to access this joy that was not available to us in active addiction. In active addiction, we not only numbed the sad things, but we also numbed those feelings of authentic, genuine joy and happiness. So to be able to experience those now and notice when it's happening, and the interesting thing is it's never actually happening when I expect it to happen again, right? Like the big moments, sometimes they don't feel so, you feel kind of flat and you're like, oh man. But then in a small moment, you can experience such tremendous joy. And it's beautiful to recognize that it's always available to me. So absolutely, impermanence is one of the hallmarks of the human condition, of the world, along with interconnectedness. And it's a beautiful thing to recognize it and be able to employ it uh, as a strategy, again, to kind of remember what I'm doing and why I'm doing it, um, in order to keep myself safe and connected.
Thank you. I love that. I love that answer. I think it's, I often will say to my clients in my practice, this too shall pass, because, and it's that, right? It's in a sense that, because, and one of the key parts that you mentioned is that joy also, this too shall pass. So how do we appreciate also when we're in those moments, because this too shall pass? Yeah.
Really?
But for someone who's listening that is feeling stuck and still sort of in that grip of addiction, what would you say to them today? What's something small they can do today to start moving in the right direction?
I would say to be gentle with yourself first and foremost. You know, I personally never flogged myself forward once. I never once improved myself in any meaningful way by being hard on myself. So I would encourage them to recognize that what they're going through is something that a lot of people go through. And that the good news is that a lot of people have recovered and have changed and healed their life. Um, Now, I would tell them that it gets easier, but it's never easy. And that in order to really like optimize their ability to transform their lives, it's probably best at this point to seek out the opinion of someone with more education and experience than they have with the problem. Because to the extent that their thinking got them into the problem, it's probably not going to get them out. So going to another person, asking for help, especially a person who's like a therapeutic professional who has, a deeper understanding and has seen this type of thing before, preferably somebody who has lived experience as well, honestly, somebody who has been through this themselves. I always say, like, if I'm going to try to get out of a hole, I'd like to learn from somebody who got out of the same hole, and didn't just read books about it. Um, yeah, and then receive that feedback and then take what you like and leave the rest, because I'm a big believer that people are empowered to, make the choices that need to be made to change and heal their lives, that they really know better, which is probably a controversial opinion. But I believe that people intuitively know, what works for them and what doesn't. It's just a matter of building and maintaining the motivation to do the thing. When I work with people, and that's what I do now, I am a peer support specialist. I work for a nonprofit called the Addiction Prevention Coalition, and I cultivate healing circles of people like all around Central Alabama, whether it be Recovery Dharma meetings or SMART Recovery meetings, or we have pre-shift Ben's Friends meetings, which are for people in the hospitality industry. We have an art lab meeting that we've recently started, really just trying to create places where people can go to receive that reciprocity, that community. Because again, it's so much harder to do in isolation. I won't say that you can't do it, but it's much harder to do it alone. So I would encourage people to seek out spaces like that and just go to as many of them as they are able, until they find one where they feel like they belong and they feel like they can say the hard thing. Because once you can sit in that circle and say the hard thing, that's how the healing's going to happen. And again, it's not going to happen by somebody telling you, giving you a 5-point plan of what you need to do. So much of it is going to happen in just expressing that secret thing, that thing that you felt so much shame about, and then looking around the room and seeing the pressure behind people's eyes and recognizing that they know what you're talking about, that they understand it because they've experienced it, and that they accept you, and that they don't judge you, and that they feel compassion for you. And then that's the moment when it's like, oh, I can feel that for me too. It gives me that permission to forgive myself and to care for myself so that I take care of myself.
I think that is the best advice I've heard in a long time, and I wish I had known um, that there were other pathways and other people and other ways to go about it earlier than I did. And so
Absolutely.
thank you so much, Randy. Yeah, thanks for being with us. I learned so much from our conversation. I actually think I'm going to go to a Recovery Dharma meeting in the next week. So I'm kind of excited now.
Awesome. Well, there's over 800 meetings, and many of them are online, and many of them are wonderful for beginners. So if you go to recoverydharma.org, you will see all of them there on the meeting list. So I encourage everyone just to be curious. If you're like me, you don't necessarily know what's going to be good for you. Like if you told me that Buddhist-inspired recovery would be part of my path, I would have thought that that was not possible. So many times it's important for me to try the thing to actually experientially see how it feels in my body. Because yeah, I don't know what I like and I don't know what's good for me. And just because I don't necessarily like something doesn't mean it's not good for me. So it's important to be curious.
And we change too. Like I still will test out an AA meeting a couple of times a year just to see if
Oh,
something resonates, if something's changed for me.
absolutely. And what works for me at 6 months might not work for me at 6 years anymore. So the great thing about having multiple pathways of recovery is that I can adapt and evolve as my recovery adapts and evolves. And I don't have to get into that rigidity that you see with some people where they're like, these are the things that I do to stay sober. And it's like, well, like you're not having a good time. And if you're not having a good time, you're in trouble. So I just always encourage people just to be curious and try different things and see what works. Because, again, I want to believe that I know what works for me, but I frequently don't. So it's good to have multiple choices.
Yeah, and I love that. Take what works for you and leave the rest. That really, yeah, that resonates with me. So thank you, Randy, for being with us. And thank you all for listening to Sisters in Sobriety. And we will see you next week.